So I figured enough time has passed for me to comfortably sort through my thoughts on The Last of Us Part 2. With most forms of media that seem to leave a lasting impression on me, or the wider industry to which it belongs, I kind of like to let some time pass before I feel confident in solidifying my final opinion on it. Especially when the source is a game as divisive and ingrained in public opinion as The Last of Us Part 2, as if the more distance between me and my experience of it, the better my perspective will be on what it actually is. Like I can more easily determine the truth if I can get some separation from the warring parties fighting on either side of it. And like with most extremely divisive things, the truth, at least for me, is kind of somewhere in the middle. I don't think that this is a bad game. I mean, not even close. And I think it's kind of silly that there's strong vocal support in favor of the idea that The Last of Us Part 2 is bad. Look, everybody's entitled to their opinion, and a variety of varying perspectives makes discussing video games all the more fun. But if somebody truly thinks that The Last of Us Part 2 is bad, then I have to wonder how many video games they've actually played. Because there's a lot of bad video games out there, and it's hard for me to share the perspective that this is even close to being one of them. But on the other hand, I don't think that this is an amazing video game either. Sure, the gameplay is fun, at times, the performances are incredible, and the graphical and audible achievements are staggering. But when people refer to this game as amazing, just as when people refer to the game as bad, it's often not the game part of the video game that they're talking about. It's the story, the narrative. And to me, for reasons that I hope to make apparent throughout the course of this video, the narrative is simply just good. And that's good. But it's just good. And so, I guess my video's hot take is just that. The Last of Us Part 2 is a good video game. It's not bad. It's not exceptional. It's good. And I know it seems like I'm not taking sides, but the truth is, I'm actually taking both sides. For me, The Last of Us Part 2 does a no good, very bad thing, somewhere around the halfway mark or so. Hold your breath in suspense of what it could possibly be. But until that point, and hell even after that point, The Last of Us Part 2 is absolutely phenomenal. And that's what I want to focus on first. I want to first focus on how The Last of Us Part 2's story, specifically the very essence of the narrative that it's attempting to tell, is simply astounding, and is perhaps even better than The Last of Us Part 1's narrative. And while the game makes a decision that I feel ultimately undermines the elegance of its story, which I will be venting about later, the core of The Last of Us Part 2's story offers a narrative scarcely rivaled in the industry today. So let's talk about it. When I mention that the core of The Last of Us Part 2's narrative is incredible, I'm referring specifically to Ellie's revenge quest, the primary narrative that both incites and concludes the story being told. Ellie's revenge quest is nothing short of spectacular, and is extremely effective in fulfilling its role as a sequel. Not only is it consistent with the major themes from the first game, specifically those of selfishness and sacrifice, but it also parallels the first game's focus on the characters of Joel and Ellie growing together, albeit more metaphorically this time around.
Trust in you.
With The Last of Us Part 1, Joel and Ellie travel across the expansive United States, growing from unlikely companions to father and daughter surrogates. Ellie, determined to have her life mean something, is dead set on being delivered to the Fireflies, in the hopes of their scientists using her immunity as a source for a cure. Joel, while complicit in this journey at first, eventually can't let Ellie go. After discovering that the Fireflies' procedure for a cure would sacrifice Ellie, Joel makes the executive decision to slaughter them all and steal her away.
Jesus Christ, Joel.
It would be years before Ellie learned the truth of that moment, and it would be longer still before that relationship could ever be salvaged. And now, despite Joel hardly being in the game at all, The Last of Us Part 2 is very much, like the first game, a story focused on the relationship between Joel and Ellie, and how that relationship is irrevocably altered over the course of their journey. And I do say their journey because, although Joel isn't physically present throughout Ellie's quests this time around, his influence is constantly felt. Throughout her revenge quest, Ellie's memory of Joel serves to play the same role that Joel did in the first game, a looming presence that both steals her life away and simultaneously sets her free. Except this time, the decision to be stolen away out of selfishness or to find meaning in sacrifice is a choice that is entirely up to Ellie.
I can't.
Ellie's quest for revenge, as much as it's about seeking retribution against Abby, is just as much about trying to save Joel's life in retrospect, as if fulfilling revenge would honor and preserve his life in memory. Throughout her revenge quest, Ellie's memories of Joel are ones of heartbreak and dissension, spurred by memories of their falling out and images of his dead face. Ellie's quest is very much an attempt to repair those memories, or at least forget them. Whether Abby is made to be a scapegoat for their broken relationship, or a vessel for Ellie's own self-hatred in failing to make reparations with Joel sooner, Ellie's quest for revenge is as much about preserving Joel's life as it is about taking Abby's.
Is that okay?
It has to be.
And this decision to try and save Joel's life, post-mortem, uniquely parallels Joel's own decision to try and save Ellie's life. Joel chose to save Ellie's life from the Fireflies, and with this new life given to her by Joel, Ellie throws it away in order to try and now save Joel's life. But just as Ellie never asked to be saved by Joel, so too did Joel not ask to be saved, in this manner, by Ellie. Joel's selfish decision to save Ellie's life damaged their relationship, and now Ellie's selfish decision to save Joel's life is what's damaging the memory of their relationship. Ellie's revenge quest is predicated on memories of Joel and their relationship itself being dead. And by pursuing a quest based on these memories, Ellie is manifesting a reality wherein these memories are the only truth there is. Joel took away meaning from Ellie's life by saving her, and now Ellie is taking away meaning from Joel's life by focusing only on the memories of him that cause pain.
I know you wish things were different. I wish things were different. But they ain't.
But it's not just Joel's life that Ellie is retroactively depriving of meaning, it's her own. Although insistent that her life would have only mattered if she sacrificed herself, Ellie could have still found meaning in this new life. Ellie found a companion in Dina and a future in JJ. She found a meaningful life in a loving family. But just as Joel stole her away from the Fireflies and deprived her life of meaning then, so too does the memory of Joel likewise steal her away from her family and deprive her new life of this new meaning. Except this time, Ellie has a say in the matter. This time, Ellie shunned that meaning herself. Unable to sacrifice the painful memories of Joel, Ellie willingly chooses to forsake her new life in exchange for her selfish quest for revenge. And Ellie leaving her family is just the culmination of the decisions she's been making throughout her journey. Forsaking Tommy's safety, neglecting Jesse's help, regretful of Dina's support. Ellie has been actively neglecting all meaning in her life in favor of her obsessive quest for revenge. This was just the final straw.
I don't want to lose you.
And it's only after finally tracking down Abby, confronting her, and nearly fulfilling her revenge, does Ellie finally remember the true Joel. Only in her memory of Joel and their relationship truly being alive is Ellie able to relinquish her quest for revenge. Rather than being inspired by memories of their broken relationship, Ellie chooses to remember Joel playing his guitar and their promise to mend their relationship. It's in this moment that Ellie is truly able to let go.
No. Just take him.
And as Ellie allows Abby to leave with Lev, it's almost as if she's allowing those broken memories of Joel to leave with them. It's in this moment that Ellie has finally forgiven Joel. The memory of him is redeemed, and their relationship is mended. No longer selfishly stealing herself away, Ellie is able to sacrifice those painful memories and finally hope to find some true meaning in her life. But is it too late for her? Ellie's selfish quest for retribution has left her without friends, a family, and her ability to play the guitar, being one of the last bastions upholding the relationship between her and Joel. Like in Joel's song to her, Ellie overcame hurricanes, floods, tides, and demons, both literally and metaphorically, in her efforts to not lose Joel in her memory and preserve a future, at least in spirit, for their relationship. But unable to play the song back, sitting alone in her empty home, Ellie finds herself in a similar position to where she was at the end of The Last of Us Part 1. Her relationship with Joel can continue, but her life is, once again, seemingly without meaning. However, this time, she can push forward with all that she knows now. She can let the past rest and make amends for her future days. And it's all up to her.
Well, that didn't suck.
And to me, that story is absolutely incredible. I think that it's just so well done. To so effectively revisit the themes of the first game while simultaneously pushing them forward in a new and bold context is so admirable. It truly feels like both a revisiting of the relationship between Joel and Ellie, as well as a natural development of it. It's so impressive.
I'll take what I can get.
That is, until all subtlety in the narrative simply disappears for a decent 15 hours or so, smack dab in the middle of the whole experience. I'm of course talking about the big ol' elephant in the room. I'm talking about Abby. Ellie's incredible narrative, which serves as the core of The Last of Us Part 2's story, is attempted to be made even more incredible by rewinding the clocks and having us experience the journey through Abby's perspective. It's a bold strategy, Cotton, and honestly, a part of me can't knock the risk.
It's great. It's the best.
The gamble. alter the player's perspective in considering Abby's plight, and have the player grow to resent Ellie's revenge quest, parallel to having the player grow to understand Abby's perspective. The risk: leaving Ellie's story and playing as Abby for half the game. If it succeeds, it's a wonderful tactic that subverts the player's prior investments and inspires an uncertainty in the player's participation of Ellie's resolve. If it fails, it stagnates the narrative and you lose 15 hours of Ellie. And it's the outcome of this gamble from which most of the divisive opinions on this game stem. I feel like very few genuine critiques of this game are centered around challenging the integrity of Ellie's narrative arc. For the most part, it seems like the general consensus is on board. What seems to be inspiring an undeniable love or a non-negotiable hate for this game is whether the Abby Gambit succeeds or whether it fails. And to me, the Abby Gambit fails.
I go the opposite fucking direction.
And the Abby Gambit failing is actually a testament to how effective the narrative is prior to the Gambit being employed. The Gambit does very little to inform or alter my experience of Ellie's revenge quest, which is both a praise of Ellie's narrative and a disruption of it. For reasons we've already addressed, The Last of Us Part 2 so effectively gets us invested in Ellie's quest for revenge. Ellie's motivations so undeniably align with the player's motivations. We all want to kill Abby for what she did to Joel. It's not even a question. Our sights are set. For most players, we're invested no matter the cost. We want our revenge.
You can't talk me out of this.
And then, just as this powerful narrative reaches a climax, the screen goes black, the clocks turn back, and we're playing as Abby. And I won't lie, I was really hoping that this would be a brief detour. But I found a new type of collectible. Then I saw Seattle Day 1, and then I saw the whole new upgrade branch. Damn it. They even start to re-give tutorial messages. I know how to swim! Why? Are they making me really learn how to swim? I really didn't want to play as Abby. I hated her throughout Ellie's story, and I hated her even more now that I was being forced to play as her.
Oh, easy.
But the thing is, I actually ended up really growing to like Abby. She's actually kind of awesome, besides the whole, killing Joel thing. The coolest moments of the game are all arguably ones that belong to Abby. Running from clickers in a forest in the dead of night, balancing on beams that bridge skyscrapers, going into Seattle's Ground Zero and fighting the Rat King, riding a horse through Haven as it burns to the ground, emerging triumphant from an absolutely brutal Seraphite battle, forsaking all past allegiances and proclaiming to Lev,
You're my people.
Just goosebumps. I love it. But ultimately, 15 hours as Abby won't endear me to her enough to forgive her for Joel. I don't think any amount of time will. Abby would be a character I love if I didn't already love Joel and Ellie. And I know it's not everybody, but I just really love the idea of a determined revenge and the all-encompassing resolve that comes with it. Honestly, if Joel was unknown to me, I'd be rooting for Abby's revenge and killing him. But through no fault of her character, it's almost too late for Abby to play a sympathetic role in the narrative. I was already successfully invested in the plight of characters that I just finished spending 1.5 games with, so it's bold of them to assume that, after masterfully investing me in one story, they can then invest me in the antithesis of that story in just 15 hours.
I can fix this.
A revenge plot is so powerful and cathartic, and to interrupt it with dissension truly feels like an unnecessary mistake, especially at such a climax in its narrative. The only way that such a disruption would be worth it is if it successfully unsettled the player's desire for revenge. That's the Gambit, and for me, it didn't work. Evidenced by the fact that, as soon as I got the chance, I let Ellie kill Abby over and over and over again. Rather than have my perceptions altered by Abby, I lost half my time with Ellie. And maybe I'm a bad participant. Maybe my own resolve for Ellie's revenge was misplaced at that point in the narrative. But the interruption of the Abby Gambit isn't the element that succeeds in changing my mind about Ellie's revenge. All it does is stagnate that natural development. And it doesn't help the interruption that, as great as Abby is as a character, her narrative path lacks all the subtlety and emotional suspense of Ellie's.
What if Owen's somewhere else?
He's there.
Again, it's no fault of Abby as a character, but a large part of her story that we participate in lacks all suspense. And that's because, well, we know where it all leads. We know the fates of her friends, and we know that she's going to find Ellie at the theater. So, in order to preserve the suspense in the actual plot details of Abby's story, her whole 3-day arc becomes reliant on the fates of unknown third parties in Yara and Lev. It's as if Yara and Lev's story becomes a stand-in for the suspense that the player would naturally be missing from the events of Abby's. But in building tension and suspense in the story of these third parties, the player sooner becomes endeared to the fates of Yara and Lev than they do in the story arc of Abby, which is the Gambit's focus character.
Can I get a minute? Please.
And you could argue that the suspense comes from Abby's natural development and growth as a character. Although her physical outcome is known, her emotional one still remains a mystery. And it's her emotional growth in relation to Yara and Lev that could then serve as the suspenseful crux of Abby's narrative arc. Except, I feel like Abby hardly develops and grows as a character at all. For one, it's easy to change your ways once you've already fully indulged of the bad thing that you shouldn't have. Before killing Joel and realizing her wish, Abby was a one-track mind. And unlike Ellie, Abby never grows to reform her decision for retribution before she achieves it. It's only after fulfilling her selfish desire for revenge does Abby begin to soften to the feelings of those around her and think of people other than herself.
It's almost a compliment.
As for her change of allegiances, Abby choosing to leave the wolves seems easy, as she seemed to only be with them as an alternative to the Fireflies. And once Owen reinvigorates her hope in the Fireflies, Abby leaving the wolves is especially easy. Speaking of Owen, cheating with him is a bad look. I know Owen's the one technically cheating here, but come on, Mel's pregnant. What are you doing? Stop this. Stop!
You're a piece of shit, Abby.
Oh, and speaking of pregnant, Abby knowingly wanting to slit a pregnant woman's throat, an action that, when unknowingly committed by Ellie, left her disgusted, is an especially bad look. And she would have done it too, if not for Lev being the one to stop her. Lev, the boy who grew up in a cult that habitually disemboweled people. This is the person telling Abby to stop. Honestly, Lev is amazing and is easily my favorite new character. The themes of displacement and a born-again identity, the symbolism of killing his mother as a mirror to losing his religion led by a mother. I could do a whole video on Lev. Now that's an example of a developing character.
Do you want to ask me about it?
Do you want me to ask you about it?
No.
Which is all just simply to say that the Abby Gambit didn't do nearly enough with the story of Abby to waver my investment in the plight of Ellie. And the thing is, this whole attempt to subvert the player's investment in Ellie didn't have to be employed through the Abby Gambit. It would have been more elegant and effective if the player's perceptions and resolves naturally antithesized to Ellie as a result of her own natural evolution, or emotional devolution, as a character. And the story begins on this path before the Abby Gambit, and it continues it after the Abby Gambit. The misgivings I grow to have for Ellie's revenge are ones that I naturally develop via Ellie's perspective. Nothing that occurs during the Abby Gambit has any effect on my interpretation of Ellie's narrative. All the Abby Gambit did was interrupt my participation in that narrative. And that's the crux of the issue.
And you wasted it!
So I guess that's how I ultimately feel about The Last of Us Part 2. It's an incredible narrative that naturally evolves the relationships and themes of its predecessor, interrupted with an unsuccessful attempt to try and make that narrative even better. It takes what it knows to be a huge risk, and gambles that that risk will either elevate the experience to new heights, or squander the heights that it's already reached. And in that sense, the game is almost designed to be divisive. Those who love the decision of the Abby Gambit naturally have their entire experience of the game elevated, whereas those who dislike the Abby Gambit naturally have their entire experience lowered. It was a great risk for excellence. But I think that The Last of Us Part 2 could have succeeded in being soundly excellent without such a bloated and aggressive risk. The stagnating plot detour seems like such an inelegant way to accomplish what was shaping up to be such an elegant revenge narrative. But again, it's hard to knock storytellers taking risks. And sure, I had some other problems with the game, or maybe with my own expectations of it. I missed the unique personalities of varying cities. I missed the moments of levity across the journey. I miss having a companion along the way. But I think that these natural expectations based on the first installment are part of the problem in accepting how good The Last of Us Part 2 really is. Expectations are so high that a good seems bad, but it's not. The Last of Us Part 2 is a really good video game. It really is. But it could have been excellent. Or, to be more specific, it could have been undeniably excellent. Therefore, Kingdom Hearts 2 is better than The Last of Us Part 2.